Yes, yes, yes. Mm-hmm. Oh, hello, friends. Jimmy Needham here. What am I doing? Oh, I am looking at this Bible. What is it, Jimmy? It's called the Vinegar Bible. And a buddy of mine told me he had one. And I had to come and see it. So that's what I'm doing right now. What is the Vinegar Bible, Jimmy? I will tell you. In the 1700s, a man named John Baskett printed a Bible. It was this one right here. This Bible right here is from 1717. And it became known as one of the most beautiful Bibles that had ever been printed. Ornate, gorgeous exterior. The illustrations were just amazing. But it also became known for being one of the weirdest Bibles ever printed because it was packed full of errors. Spelling errors, words missing. But the most notable error occurred in Luke chapter 20, the parable of the vineyard. In this particular Bible, John Baskett's Bible, it doesn't say the parable of the vineyard, it says the parable of the vinegar. So this became an interesting, quirky footnote of history, but it is known today as the Vinegar Bible. And I think that's fascinating. I'll tell you another thing that's fascinating. The phrase a basket case actually came from the making of this Bible. John Baskett made this Bible, and it was so full of errors that it was no longer good for any purpose. It was a basket case. And that's where we get the term. So you learn something new every day, kids. Now, I'm telling you all this, one, because my buddy told me he had this Bible, and I said I had to come up and see it. This is amazing. And two, it got me thinking about the story of how we even got our English Bible. And it's actually a remarkable tale, and I would like to tell it to you now. It all started with a man named Jerome. Jerry, as I like to call him. Jerome was a monk in the city of Bethlehem. Ever heard of it? And he was an extraordinary monk for at least one big reason. He was extremely competent in Greek and Hebrew. Now, this was a big deal back in the 300s. Jerome lived in the 4th and 5th century. And it was a big deal because these were the languages that the Bible were written in originally. The Old Testament Hebrew, the New Testament Greek. Jerome had facility in both these languages. Now, what was interesting about life in the 300s is the popularity of the Greek language was sort of falling away, and a new language was rising to the surface. A new sort of common tongue for the people had shown up in the Western world, and it was Latin. Jerome spoke Latin. Jerome could navigate Greek and Hebrew, so he became the perfect candidate for Pope Damascus I to be the person to make a translation of the Bible that was readable for everybody. And so his shoulder was tapped and he took up the challenge. Jerome created the Latin version of the Bible in the late 300s, and it's known today as the Latin Vulgate. That word Vulgate just means common. It was the Bible written in the common tongue for common people to understand in their own language. It is an incredible feat. And that Bible became the Bible for the church for the next 1,000 years. Kind of a big deal. Now, there was one big problem, and it was language changes over time. Latin fell out of style, but the Vulgate remained. So as cultures moved on, the Bible became less and less readable within the Christian community. They couldn't understand what was being said from the pulpit or read from the pulpit. This is a real problem because it turns out we meet the living God in these pages, and now the people don't understand. The bigger problem than that was the Catholic Church didn't change their tune. They held on to the Latin Vulgate even though the language was changing. This made the Catholic clergy even more and more important to be mediators of the written word to God's people. You needed the priest in order to get this book, or you didn't get this book. That's a really big problem. And over time, this became such a problem that men began to rise up going, this isn't right. The Bible is the authority over my life, and I need to know what it says. And I can't know it unless it's in my language, and we need to do something about it. So folks began attempting to translate the Bible into the common tongue. Folks like John Wycliffe. So think the 14th century. John Wycliffe was an Englishman and a scholar, and he was the first guy ever to take a crack at translating the Bible into English. First guy ever. It's amazing. The problem was he wasn't translating from the Greek and Hebrew like Jerome. In those days in England and in Europe at large, the access to the Greek and Hebrew manuscripts, it just wasn't there. So he translated the Bible not from Greek and Hebrew, but from Jerome's Latin Vulgate. So it was kind of a translation of a translation, which is not as good as getting back to the original sources. Now, even just him translating the Bible at all into the English language was just anathema to the Catholic Church. They weren't going to have it. So when John Wycliffe died, they actually 31 years later went to his grave, dug up his bones, and burned his bones, castigating him as a heretic for what he did. It was not a very cool thing to be a Bible translator back in that day. Okay, so what happens next? Well, about 100 years of history unfolds, and in that 100 years after John Wycliffe, some crucial things take place that make the translation of the Bible way more possible. One of those things is the invention of the printing press. Thank you, Gutenberg. One of the other things that became so lucrative to getting us our English Bible is the Textus Receptus, which I know all of us were thinking about today, and I was just the first one to say the word. But the Textus Receptus was created. Now, what is that? Well, there was a man named Desiderius Erasmus. His friends called him Desi. I don't know if that's true. But he was also a scholar and a humanist and a linguist, and he was the first man ever to compile the Greek New Testament into one working unit called the Textus Receptus. That was 1516. And now for the first time ever, you had essentially a one-stop shop to be able to go to the Greek text of the New Testament to see what it says. This is huge. This unlocks Bible translation. Men like Martin Luther come on the scene, and they use the Textus Receptus to translate the New Testament into German. And then another man in England comes on the scene, and his name was William Tyndale. William Tyndale also got a hold of Erasmus's text, and he was able to, for the very first time in church history, translate the New Testament from the original Greek into English. It had never been done before. This is a huge moment in the translational history of the Bible. He also got to work on the Old Testament using the Hebrew manuscripts as well. He didn't quite finish that out because he was eventually burned at the stake as a heretic. You think working on an oil rig all day is a dangerous profession. Try being a Bible translator in the 1500s. It does not typically go well for you. Tyndale's last words before being burned alive were this: "God, open the eyes of the King of England." Now, why would he say that? Who was the King of England at the time? Well, the King of England at the time was a man named Henry VIII. Henry Tudor, or Hank to his buddies. Again, I can't verify that, but if I was his friend, I would call him Hank. Old Hank was not a big fan of William Tyndale. Not a fan of the translation of the Bible into English. He was a big champion of the Roman Catholic Church, one of its loudest promoters, until old King Henry got his eye on a gal named Anne Boleyn, and he was married to another woman named Catherine of Aragon, and he wanted a divorce. The Catholic Church said no, and so he said no to the Catholic Church. He picked up his ball, he went home, and he said, "I'm going to start my own church, the Church of England, please and thank you." And as soon as that happened, you're never going to believe this, suddenly King Henry was kind of into an English translation of the Bible. Go figure. One of the first attempts of an official English translation of the Bible came in 1539 with a book we call the Great Bible. It was called the Great Bible because it was huge, for one, And it was hugely expensive. If you wanted a copy of this thing at your home in England, you'd be spending about $1,000 to get it, which sort of kept the common folk away from owning it themselves. So not exactly the best option for every home in England. Lots of other translations started to come down the pike after the Great Bible, including one called the Geneva Bible, which was created in Geneva. Now, this was a huge hit. The Protestants loved it. It was a very excellent translation. The problem was that in the marginal notes of the Bible, the editors had included all these sick political burns to the king. And it turns out that people in power don't like being made fun of in the Bible. So that didn't quite catch on. We need a Bible that all of England can embrace, from the clergy to the commoner to the royal, all of us. Is there one Bible that can rule them all? The answer is yes, and it came through a man named Jimmy, as all good things do. James the First of England. Ever heard of him? James I finally came on the scene, and in the 1600s, he commissioned roughly 50 men to work on an official, kind of once-for-all, standardized version of the English Bible, one that everybody could stack their hands on and say, yes, that Bible's for me. Something that would be readable, accessible, affordable, the right size even. This was the task that he gave these men to do, and they did it. And in 1611, they turned in this, the King James Bible. 1611. This is an actual 1611 King James Bible. Quite a bit smaller than the Great Bible, quite a bit more affordable. Wonderful translation, wonderful use of the English language. And in fact, this Bible right here became the single greatest selling book in the English language of all time. Some estimates have it at over 1 billion copies sold. So there you have it. The English Bible, finally readable, accessible, affordable for everyone. This was the dream since the days of John Wycliffe. And now here it is, not just in my hand, but probably in your back pocket on an app somewhere. Isn't this amazing? So what does this all mean? What can we take away from this? Jerome once wrote, "Ignorance of the Scriptures is ignorance of Christ." And it's true, we meet Jesus in these pages. And the fact that we have the Bible, the Word of God, in our own language as English speakers is an incalculable gift. Men and women lost their lives so you and I could have this to read anytime we want. And we honor them and their work by reading it anytime we want. We honor their work by becoming people who dig into this book and feast on it for all it's worth. So if there's any takeaway from this news and this story, it's this. Say thank you by feasting on the Word of God. Jesus himself said, "Sanctify them by your truth. Your word is truth." Allow yourself the benefit, the gift of being changed into the image of Jesus by gazing at Jesus in the pages of his word. It really will change your life.